Hello, this is Mr. Painter with another fabulous IXL tutorial. Today we're working on O4 classified quadrilaterals. And this is going to be section 1 of 2. So O5 is classified quadrilaterals 2. All right, as we get started today, we're going to take a look at some definitions. The definitions will be key to identifying some of our objects that we're going to be looking for in our today's IXL. All right, so a couple words we're going to need to know is a quadrilateral is a shape with 4 sides. So as long as it's got 4 sides, no matter how long or what they look like, and they all connect, it's a quadrilateral. A kite is a quadrilateral with 2 pairs of sides that are congruent and adjacent. So what that means is 2 sides are the same, and another 2 sides are the same as well. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with 1 pair of parallel sides. So early in IXL, we talked about trapezoids. A square is a parallelogram with 4 right angles and 4 congruent sides. So most of you guys are able to see a square as long as it got 4 sides, it got right angles in them. Solid, right? A little bit harder is a rhombus. A rhombus is a parallelogram with 4 sides that are congruent. So a rhombus is like a square, but the square does not have right angles. So it's like a square that's like leaning over. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides that are parallel and congruent. The word parallel means the sides go along the side of each other, but they don't cross. And congruent means the same side, same length. And a rectangle is a parallelogram with 4 right angles. All right, let's see what those objects do for us and see if we can identify some of these quadrilaterals. So we're at IXL right now, smart score of 0. We're going for a smart score of 80. With 0 questions answered so far. All right, what name best describes this shape? Well, because it is a trapezoid, take a look at the definition of trapezoid, is a quadrilateral with 1 pair of parallel sides. So parallel sides, there's only 1 set of them. It's a trapezoid. Definitely not a square because all sides are not the same. A parallelogram, it is a parallelogram, but it's not what it best describes the shape. So again, this is a parallelogram, but because a trapezoid is more precise, we're going to go with trapezoid. And this is definitely not a rectangle. All right, 12 points. What name best describes this shape? We got a parallelogram. Pretty good. Definitely not a square. It is not a trapezoid and is not a rectangle. So this one has to fall in parallelogram because these are not even correct answers. All right, what name best describes the shape? It is a parallelogram. It is a rhombus. It is not a trapezoid. And it's definitely not a rectangle. So now we have 2 right answers between parallelogram and rhombus. But we want what best describes the shape. So going back to our definition, a parallelogram is just a generic quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and congruent. All right. But a rhombus is 4 sides that are congruent. So because all 4 sides are congruent, rhombus would be the better answer because the parallelogram says, well, one side matches with one side and the other side matches with the other side. But because all 4 are congruent, this one has to be under rhombus. So a rhombus better describes this shape. All right, what name best describes this shape? That is a square if I ever saw it. Okay, yes, it is a rectangle. Yes, it's a rhombus, but it has to be a square because 4 sides the same, 4 corners, right angles, it's a square. All right, what name best describes the shape? Let's take a look. It is not a trapezoid because a trapezoid would require only 2 sides to be parallel, but we got 4 sides that are parallel. It is a parallelogram. A rhombus, it is not a rhombus because 4 sides are not congruent because we got 2 and 2. And it is a rectangle. So between a parallelogram and a rectangle, we need to pick the better answer. Because they have right angle markings inside this one would be a rectangle. Now, if these markings of a right angle were not there, and if it were leaning, then that would be a parallelogram. All right, smart score of 47. What name best describes this shape? This one looks kind of funny. Looks like we got 2 sets of congruent angles, and I believe there was a definition for that. Oh, here we go. A kite is a quadrilateral with 2 pairs of sides that are congruent and adjacent. And it does look like a kite, right? So when you have 2 sides that are next to each other like that are congruent, it's a kite. Is it a rectangle? No, there's no right angles in there, right? It is a parallelogram. Let's see, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and congruent. Actually, according to that definition, this is not a parallelogram because they're not opposite parallel. Is it quadrilateral? Yeah, it's a shape with four sides. So between a kite and a quadrilateral, a kite is way more precise than a quadrilateral. So this one needs to go with a kite. All right. What name best describes this shape? This is a nothing shape. It is not a square. Definitely not a rectangle. Definitely not a kite. Is it a shape with four sides? 1, 2, 3, 4. So this one is a quadrilateral. Okay, a quadrilateral is just a very generic four-sided polygon. That's all this thing is. So quadrilateral is going to take the answer on that one. All right. What name best describes this shape? Let's take a look at our options. It is not a square because they have no right angles in there. A trapezoid is a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides. That one looks pretty good. Let's see what else we got. A rhombus must have four sides that are congruent. Well, all four sides are not the same. A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and congruent. So a parallelogram would be just like this, but this side here and the top side here would also have to be parallel, and they're not. So a trapezoid is the only correct answer here. The other ones are not even correct at all. Smart score 65, 8 question answer. What name best describes the shape? This is not a square. It is a rhombus because all four sides are congruent. It is a parallelogram because it has both pairs of opposite sides parallel. These two sides are parallel. Top and bottom are parallel. So rhombus and parallel are looking good so far. And it is also a quadrilateral because it's a shape with four sides. So we have three options that are potentially all correct. Looking at the directions, best describes. So the most precise answer on this one, let's see if you guessed it. I think you're thinking rhombus is correct. Okay. Rhombus is the most precise answer because we have four sides that are congruent. Parallelogram, four sides don't have to be congruent, and a quadrilateral, four sides definitely don't have to be congruent. So rhombus is the most precise answer here. All right. What name best describes the shape? Let's take a look at our options. Parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and congruent. Could be a parallelogram. Quadrilateral is a shape with four sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. It is also a quadrilateral, so first two answers are correct. A kite is a quadrilateral with two pairs of sides that are congruent and adjacent. No, they're not adjacent to each other, so this one cannot be a kite. And it also cannot be a rectangle because a rectangle must have four 90-degree angles in there. And because it looks like a rectangle, it's going to be squished towards the left, not a rectangle. So now we're stuck between a parallelogram and a quadrilateral. Because a parallelogram is more precise than a quadrilateral, let's double check parallelogram, and I think that's going to be our best answer. So does this object have a pair of opposite sides that are parallel and congruent? Yeah, parallel, congruent, same length, same size. So beautiful. All right, next up, in terms of what describes this shape, choose all that applies. So be very careful when you're in the 70s. You're going to choose all of them that are the correct answers. So remember, we were talking about multiple right answers in the past. Instead of picking the best one, we're just going to pick all that apply. So quadrilateral, is this a shape with four sides? Yes, a square does have four sides. Is it a square? A square is a parallelogram with four right angles and four congruent sides. Yep, four right angles, four sides, looking good. A rectangle. A rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, they got four right angles, so this is also a rectangle. And last but not least, is it a parallelogram? A parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and congruent. So a square fills the needs of all four of these. All right, one more question. We're almost to 80. In terms, which terms describe the shape? Choose all that apply. It can't be a square because all four sides are not equal. It is a quadrilateral because it's a shape with four sides. It is a rectangle because it has a parallelogram with four right angles. And a rectangle, because it's a parallelogram with four right angles, is also a parallelogram, which is a quadrilateral with both pairs of opposite sides parallel and congruent. All right, this takes us to a SMART score of 82. Thank you, and this concludes your IXL for 04.